great to be joined today by Kim Wiegand. Now, Kim is a professional services strategist, and your name came up when I interviewed and had a great conversation with Gabrielle Forbes, and she talked about your work at Ashurst, which was your most previous role. So welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Gabby for inviting me to join you.
No problem. I'm fascinated by hanging out as a former partner with BD people and with broader people in law firms, just because sometimes as a lawyer, I've obviously loved hanging out with my partners, but as much as that was the case, you just got that broader perspective. And so I really enjoyed that aspect. So talk us through what is a professional services strategist, why professional services, and what your previous roles have been.
Sure, no problem. My previous roles are born out of having started a law degree and not enjoying it and thinking 2 semesters in, what the hell am I doing? This is not for me. And I fell into BD, or in marketing actually. I fell into marketing at uni and really loved it. I think that's evolved quite naturally, but in terms of I've worked within the professional services industry, always done marketing, business development, and always really enjoyed the environment. And it's distinctly different from a FMCG or more corporate environment. Not to say that I don't enjoy those environments, but I think I'm probably more naturally aligned to the professional services and partnership model.
Yes.
My roles have moved and progressed, I think, in industry along the lines that these roles within law firms particularly have evolved. So when I started at, for example, Flower and Heart, which obviously is no longer in existence, and those in the Queensland market will know it was very proudly the longest standing Queensland law firm.
Very traditional Queensland
Genuinely.
firm. Yeah.
And that was very marketing heavy. And I think at that point I'd started to move more into business development and what that meant. And then I moved to the UK and spent time in professional services firms, magic circle firms, mid-tier regional based firms. And it's really there that my business development skill and interest in more looking at growth strategy was really apparent. I was the first, I suppose you call it capital markets BD manager at Freshfields in London. And that was an opportunity, like a clean slate. They had no plan, they had no growth plan. It was at a time where there was very few IPOs coming to market and capital raisings because it was right after the GFC. Yeah. So there was a real tension in the market, and it was looking at positioning and competitive positioning and getting ahead of the deals and really being well positioned. So it was very much a strategic positioning play, and the partners were really open to support and advisory from my role in a different way than I think some of the other more, say, secure groups at the time were utilising their resources. So I'm grateful to them for that because it opened up opportunities for me. At that point, I think it's where you start to see a shift around positioning of BD within firms to be much more growth orientated, much more strategic. Yes. I saw the roles shift, particularly at that top tier.
Much less marketing. Much more genuine.
Genuinely,
BD.
and I think that's not to denigrate the work of marketing, because that is such an important area of the industry and the business services space. But there was definitely a separation between marketing and business development.
Yes.
If you fast forward 15 years, and you see the importance, relevance, and the role that business development and strategic growth plays within global firms and mid-tier firms, all firms, it's impressive, and I think it's a testament to the skill we have in the market, but also the adaptation of firms to really appreciate and lean into that advice and support. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, Kim, we share 2 employers in common. So I did an early stint at Blake Dawson Waldron.
Oh, did you really?
That's when I worked with Gabrielle.
Yeah.
And I don't know if many people know this, but in the 90s, I did a stint at Freshfields as a paralegal on environmental litigation. So I know the fleet as it then was in the 90s. Yeah, I hear you in terms of the evolving role of BD, but I want to step back a bit because I want to drill down in some of those conversations around BD and the future. But I want to sort of have a broader canvas to begin with and talk about the perspective of the professional services market, both globally and in Australia. How do you see it? In what way it is changing? And how do you see potential points of disruption?
Look, I think if you take a step back and look at the domestic market in Australia, you can't completely separate it from the international market within legal services, because a lot of the firms operating have a global lens. A lot of the clients operating in Australia have a global lens. So there is that inherent, challenge of dissecting it from a domestic and international standpoint. But I think that then plays to the opportunities play to the domestic market. And let's say that, I want to call it that mid-tier. I think there's a real distinction and I think separation happening between that top tier, that big six, but particularly those big international firms and the mid-market. What I perceive is coming and is already underway is more of a consolidation at that mid-market.
Yes.
A number of things are driving that. One, it is the demands of clients and those firms. And a recent Thomson Reuters article or survey rather reported that there was an increase in sophisticated clients wanting to use international firms. So their requirements, their needs, whether it be perception of expertise, international connections and network, whatever it might be. So there is a shift of very sophisticated clients moving to that top tier, very much international lens. You have, though, a really talented and growing and ambitious cohort at the next tier down. And I spoke to a number of them recently for an article, and they are ambitious, they are growing, they're driven, and they're acquisitives. They have clear strategies for growth, and they see the opportunity at that space. You also have pricing as a challenge. So, COVID, a lot of firms paused on pricing for a number of years, many, and then the panel periods over that time have all sort of come up. A number of the significant panel periods have come up in the last 12 to 18 months. The top tier firms have had to continue to endure and stomach the increase in cost of wages, etc., cost of operating at that scale. They've got the top talent, most expensive talent, etc. Yes. They haven't been able to on-charge that because a lot of the work they do is for these panel arrangements. Therefore, we've seen uplifts, significant uplifts during that period now of rectification of where they should be to be operating really profitably. That's really separating that mid-tier and top tier as well, that price gap now. Mid-tier are able to suffice and grow and operate.
And be more flexible.
100%.
And meet the market. It's really interesting you should say that because it's a very fragmented market still, and particularly at the mid-tier level. And I had an experience in the last role with private equity money in terms of the DWF story. And we're seeing some of that roll-up approach because it is so fragmented and it does represent opportunity. So I think it's interesting that in the mid-tier space there's those conversations.
Yes.
Coupled with some capital that we might start to see some changes.
I think we will. I mean, it's prevalent in the US, particularly PE investment. In the UK, it's probably the most mature market, the UK, for PE investment.
And in accounting as well, of course.
100%. And I think we're going to see now in Australia firms set up different structures, more corporate orientated structures that enable that investment. I mean, to date, you've had investment into side businesses, so law firms who have a services business that they can seek investment, or an IT arm, or diversified businesses for investment, not their main partnership model. But I think there are new businesses coming to market, and I did speak to one last week who didn't want to be named in an article I penned on PE investment, but looking at how they structure their multiple businesses to enable capital investment that will allow them to grow to a point to exit, in a really short time frame. So I do think that the market will shift because of capital, consolidation, a split. And also those top tier firms and international firms are refocusing on international clients. There's a drive to say, how are we maximising our network and import and export of work for those clients rather than just the domestic market?
So does it follow from what you're thinking, and I tend to agree that we'll see a consolidation and increase at the mid-tier level and there's great opportunities there. Does that make the big players, if I can call it that, under some level of existential threat, or it's not that bad?
They're big and they're huge. Australia, for a lot of them, is important. It's an important market for a lot of internationals, but it's not the main market. I mean, US is...
Huge market.
It paralyses, the concept of Australia in competition with the US. I do think, though, international firms, unless they are in the US, will struggle to grow to a size that they can compete with those US firms. I do think that's going to be a critical factor for those international firms and continued growth. But in the domestic market in Australia, no, I think those international firms are fine.
Yeah.
We had the exit of Hogan Lovells, for example. There are others who have smaller operations here, but I think for the purposes of those larger global firms who are predominantly US based, that suffices their need for their Australian market and for their clients.
Yeah, they need a presence.
100%.
But I mean, when we were looking at it, I think numbers that I can recall was that US, in terms of global legal spend, is about 55% globally. So what a huge market.
400 billion by the last stats.
Enormous market. And still very traditional market, very deregulated in many ways, high hourly rate, still not as much disruption, not as much price point disruption, etc. So it's still a very traditional model. Let's touch on pricing. I'm an insurance lawyer, so we're sometimes at times it felt like a bit of a race to the bottom, which you wanted to avoid. But at the same time, the advantage of event-based fees, giving clients certainty, project-based fees, the incentives that were inbuilt to be efficient and to use resources more effectively and to really think about your work in a project-style approach. Do you see the end of the billable hour, or do you think it's a metric that is...
I see it shifting.
Yeah.
Do I see that firms can shift away from recording billable hours and equating their value to the number of units? No. I do think for the most part, most firms will continue on that path. I think the demands of clients are shifting, though. I mean, in a number of recent panels, sophisticated institutional kind of clients are going back to panel firms and saying, we're not increasing your rate by anywhere near the expectation you have. We're actually expecting AFAs. We want different models. We're not going to be charging or paying you by the hour. We want to know what it's going to cost us up front. However you manage that, up to you.
Yes.
But I'm not going to commit to number of hours.
Yeah.
That's happening. In the mid-tier and below, particularly smaller firms, agility around value-based pricing is becoming much more prevalent. And I think that they're much more able to trial and test value-based pricing, non-hourly rate-orientated pricing. Sophisticated clients, I think, are going to continue to demand different models, and I think larger firms are going to have to adapt. But that means an entire shift of their operating model, of their reward and remuneration model, on their incentives model. You know, we've had in corporate structures for a long time uplifts, discounts, broken deal, and all of those things, cap fees, fixed fees, but it's still predicated on utilising a 6 minutes, hourly
exactly
rate.
Right. It's still the business metric that underpins remuneration, reward.
Everything. So I do think that's going to be harder to shift. I mean, I know a number of firms are turning to different ways to reward partners for more collaborative activities, or, it's not necessarily an eat what you kill, it's how we're working together. But that's a really more qualitative metric. You have applying qualitative measures to create this reward, to shift behaviour. That's another way internally firms will start to consider, reward for partners doing the right behaviour. But at the end of the day, the way they bill, I think, will be a really hard thing to shift.
Yeah, I wanted to take a bit of a sideways direction now, because thanks for that market scan. I thought it was. I tend to agree with the broader, bigger picture. Obviously, I'm in the leadership space as well as professional services, and I want to talk about the importance of authentic leadership, and I want to talk about whether the incentives that you've touched upon allow or promote authenticity in leadership, because really, particularly in your chair over there from a BD perspective, with a growth mindset, there has to be at some times a level of vulnerability in the terms of how do we need to grow, what do we need to do better and differently. And often in partner land, coming more from this space, it feels like it's a very defensive game.
Yeah.
It feels like at times we're just trying to hold on to what we have, and there's not much room for creativity and change and for thinking differently, because it's relentless and you've got to produce, and you're a cog in a big machine, and your value is fairly prescribed. So let's go into authenticity. You've worked with a lot of leaders in professional services. Can you give us some colour on what your take on authenticity in professional services leadership and how that plays out?
I think there is, and there still needs to be, a continued education between the difference between supervision and managerial responsibilities and roles and leadership. They're different skills. They're entirely different skills, different roles. The concept within an environment where you are rewarded and remunerated, and the structure operates based on, again, hitting certain figures and supervision, and it's a pyramid scheme, right? And I get into trouble for saying that, but it feels like a little bit of a pyramid scheme.
Is.
You're rewarded as a partner for feeding your pyramid and creating your pyramid and running your pyramid in the number of hours you do. Leading is actually being selfless. It's being humble. It's clearing the runway for others to do the work that they do best. It's allowing others to shine, and you standing in the background, supporting, elevating, empowering, and advocating for those people that you lead. There's a difference between people following you because they respect you and they know you will support them to do your best work, versus obeying your manager because you're being told what to do. I think we have got those very, very mixed within a law firm context, within a day-to-day operations. So you've got leadership in your executive leadership team, where you've got a CEO or a managing partner who is responsible for setting that vision, for clearing that runway, for setting expectations, for inspiring and empowering those around them to lead those initiatives and drive those really important shifts, changes, whatever it might be within the firm to achieve their strategic goals. But on a day-to-day basis in the pyramid, a partner in charge of a group of humans who are empowered or are rewarded rather to achieve particular results, that's a different thing. We need to, I think, distinctly separate those two things and look at how everyday partners can lead with authenticity and vulnerability, and actually say, I'm going to make myself vulnerable by pushing every single hour I have on my docket this week to my team to make sure they are learning, they are full, and that there's no reason that they should be dinged. And that is a challenge, right?
Particularly when there's a defensive game, you've got to be seen to be producing.
100%.
Paul Keating's got a great quote, never back against a horse called self-interest, which is kind of like the incentives. Despite the best rhetoric, the incentives really do define behaviour. And I think that needs to at times be looked at, honestly.
Yes.
That's why I encourage these kind of conversation, because it can work against the authenticity of growing and letting go, because the system is such that it's very much about what you produce, and you're a cog in a big machine.
Yes. I spoke to an accounting or an advisory firm recently who their partners don't record hours. They don't record their time. They're responsible for pushing work to their team and making sure their team are operating at capacity and utilisation, and that wonderful utilisation term. But they have a different role. Their job is different from necessarily having to fill my bucket before I can fill down to this bucket to this bucket. And then you find partners doing things, or senior associates doing things they shouldn't be doing. It's not highest and best use of them. They're not stretching, learning, growing. And surely your leader would want you to be stretching, growing and learning. There's also then, again, the pyramid concern or issue in terms of leadership should be about creating succession plan for yourself. And there is an inherent nervousness, I think, about creating someone and empowering them to have client relationships and grow that client relationship and embed in those clients when they are going to become competition for you, and then create their own little pyramid. So, there is challenge in that, and the model doesn't support that. And I know I've mentored and also coached, rather, a number of senior associates who've stepped up into partner. And they're like, well, I'm still operating as his senior associate because he won't let me, oh gosh, well, you're a partner now.
Yes.
How are you growing your pie over here? Your business case was distinctly different from his practice. What are you doing on your business case? That lack of leading and clearing the runway and ensuring your SA or has all of the fuel, the roadmap, there's no debris, ensuring that makes that other partner vulnerable.
Yes.
Be vulnerable, because then that makes you grow and change and look for new opportunities and stretch into higher roles. I think that's leadership, making yourself vulnerable and empowering others to be the best they can be. That's different from supervising their time.
Yes, that's a really good distinction. I like that distinction. Let's change and talk about client and client's experience, because that's been a space you've been really instrumental in. And of course, law firms, wax lyrical, we're all client-centric. The clients are front and centre of what we do. Is that true?
No. So fundamentally not. And I think, the industry is evolving, and the way I've seen it is that we've gone from, I have a thing to sell you, I'm going to bring my service to you and you're going to buy my service because you need it, to, I know what's keeping you up at night, GC. I know these things are on your plate. We can solve all of these things. To now going to clients and saying, let's chat about what's keeping you up at night. Yeah. And these are the things we know are coming down the pipeline. And let's co-create a solution that's going to really support and impact your business in a positive way. And if we think of client relationships and what makes great client relationships, it's having that depth of connectivity with the client, that you are there to support their business success, and having personal engagements and relationships that you know that person's objective or agenda is to go from VP of sales to deputy VP rather, or to head of or CEO. That's their career path. How are you helping them get there? How are you building that relationship with that client? You knowing that their growth plan for that business is going to be highly acquisitive and they're going to be acquiring a lot of different organizations, right? What are the challenges for that business? How are you helping that person to get to where they need to go by solving their business issues? But again, coming back to the reward, we're not rewarded for going and navel gazing and thinking about our clients in that way. But we should be, because that's what creates depth of relationship.
That is a true partnership. And going back to the point you made about that territorial holding on of clients that partners do, it makes sense not to do that, because my view of professional staff is they should have client interactions as soon as their professional journey allows, meaningful client. And that, of course, embeds various relationships in. But obviously there's a sense of loss of control that people struggle with. But I think that's the key issue. It's not about what the immediate problem is necessarily. And sure you have to solve that. I mean, if you're in dispute, that might look pretty bad. But the reality is what clients really want to know is some reflections on, well, why did we get in this dispute? What were the causes potentially? What are things we could do better and differently? That whole point you raised about how do we support the people within their clients to progress? I mean, people will remember that much more than they'll remember that great result you got in one piece of litigation.
100%. And it's trust, right? It comes down to trust and how much you trust that not only that human but that firm is going to be there for you. And the trust equation, I mean, it talks about, credibility, intimacy and reliability over self-interest. A lot of partners think that they've got a trusted relationship, but they are holding so tight to that relationship that they're showing their self-interest. I couldn't possibly introduce you. I'm going to keep with this relationship with my one-dimensional view because I know your real estate portfolio and that's my job and you're my client. Actually, if they took a step back and took their self-interest off the table and they said, actually, it would be better for my client if I also introduced them over here to that partner, and I made myself vulnerable and I had to share with that partner saying, look, this is a really important client to me and this is how I need you to support them. I mean, Heidi Gardner's work on collaboration released her first book, showcased 6 distinct challenges for collaboration in firms, but she also showed, and they're about, I don't trust that partner over there. It's about internal trust as much as trust with partner clients. But it distinctly shows the commercial benefits of taking your self-interest off the table and doing what's best for your client, even though you have anxiety about it. That's a really hard thing to overcome.
That is so true. It's sort of getting out of your own way at times, isn't it? And being genuine. I mean, I was reflecting on this recently because I had a pretty big institutional client that I was managing. I got a sense, for whatever it's worth, that it was best that someone else would manage it. I just had a sense that I'd done enough. It had gone too far and it needed a fresh pair of eyes. Now, that's obviously was against my immediate necessary financial interest, but I had a game plan to move on from that practice. But it was really interesting that I could see it.
Yes.
I sort of sensed that the client actually needed something, just someone different, to be frank.
And I wonder how many partners see that in their clients. We often get feedback from clients saying they want to see other partners, and yet partners can't let go or won't let go. And it's that protectionism that I think will be a real challenge for extending and expanding the pyramid, ultimately. The stickiness of clients. I mean, clients can be fickle. That one person leaves that you have that embedded relationship with, they genuinely will leave with your, your trust and your embedded relationship. Your firm will lose that work. Your practice will lose that work. And I think that's the challenge. The more clients are embedded into the firm ethos, institutionalized relationships, the more you will benefit.
Yes.
But it's a really hard thing to get over.
How do we better promote collaboration in terms of incentives in a very practical way?
The challenge also comes down to partnership model. I mean, there are certain models that lockstep's probably better for that. Other models just don't support that in any way, shape or form.
Where there's a kind of eat what you kill mentality, it just cuts across.
Genuinely. Yeah. And then firms have tried to introduce things like, introduce fee earner fees and, ongoing incentives to grow that client in a period of time. How often are we cross-selling into others if you can get 3 services into that client, i.e. you collaborate with others and create more opportunities, therefore you will see kickback for the next X years.
Yeah.
A number of firms have tried different models.
There's been a number of things.
Yeah, I don't know that there's no silver bullet to it because it's the behaviour that we're taught. I say we, the industry, has grown up on and taught. Different firms have different cultures, I think, as well. So if you've got a culture of collaboration, I think that's beneficial. A number of firms now I know are looking at collaboration and Heidi's work is fundamental to a lot of that. I know she runs a lot of accelerators in that space. So I do think there's more work to be done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work underway. I would suggest firms lean into that as much as possible from an early stage.
Absolutely. And be really genuine about what that means, and be genuine about whether they've set incentives that are counter effectively to this intent.
Genuinely.
Because it's it's very important. Client experience. How do we effectively measure it from a practical? What does good look like? How do we measure it and embed it in a way that gets the attention of the partners and is effective?
Yeah. So client experience to date has been very much measured by an NPS score, which I fundamentally think is an unreliable source of data, to be fair, unless it's captured realistically, like reliably and holistically across clients, which very rarely is. And that's a propensity to recommend you to others, essentially.
Yeah.
That is a one-dimensional view of how happy were they and how much will they refer us to others, being a bit of a benchmark. I think we actually need to look past just pure metrics on the client-to-firm engagement. They're wonderful validators in terms of a vanity metric that we can pat ourselves on the back and go, oh, our clients were so happy,
they
yay.
like us.
If we really look fundamentally at the impact and power of client experience, positive, outstanding client experience that differentiates your brand, it's commercial. Your clients are stickier. They will use you across more services. They will refer you to more new clients. They will pay you more than they currently pay you. They will continue using you for a longer lifetime value, so a longer lifespan rather. So, they'll continue using you over a number of years. They are all lag indicators. So they're all what we see when we have outstanding client experience. To get to that point, client experience must be fundamentally embedded as a way the firm operates, which sounds ridiculous, but saying that client centricity, solving our clients' problems, that's the whole reason that we exist as a firm, is to solve that particular client group's problems. How are we set up to achieve that in the most wonderful and amazing, outstanding way for our client? Because if they're happy and they think we've done a great job, they will come back again and again and again. Unfortunately, there is such high legal demand or demand for legal services in the market, firms can churn and burn clients without thinking much about it. As long as they're getting that vanity metric that we've done so well, they often press pause and go, okay, we've done enough. Or they'll put an LNOD program on to say how you have a better conversation with your client, which is important, don't get me wrong, but it's one dimension of a very multifaceted, multidimensional challenge. And by that I mean for a firm to shift and change and evolve and be agile enough to meet the changing and evolving expectations of clients, particularly in an age with AI and B2C service expectations that we get in everyday life is gone through the roof since COVID actually, and then that's when we saw a real significant shift and uplift. Clients now expect from their law firm or accounting firm or any other professional service firm the same service, the same level of bedside manner, all of those things that they would get from any other service in life, and they expect it to be instantaneously available, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we look within a law firm, context, accounting firm, and say, just work harder, associate, Just work faster, practice executive or, word processing. Just work harder because our clients want it quicker. They want it better. They want it faster. All of those things. It comes down to operationally, how are we evolving our business to put the client at the centre of our IT systems, our practice executives, their working hours, can we create all sorts of things. How are we operationally considering what's best for our clients in L&OD, in recruitment? People coming into the firm, do they know that actually servicing clients and being in and of service to clients is part of their job? Does an associate know that they actually need to know how to have a conversation with a client that's empathetic, to listen? Do they know all of those things from the outset? That's actually a part of their job, and they're going to be measured on it. We haven't actually embedded client centricity and client service into our firms. No,
it sort of operates over here. We value what clients think. We want to be recommended. We want to put it on our tenders and on our websites if need be. But really, operationally, we're running a law firm, thank you very much. We know what's best.
And we're in charge.
We're in charge. We know what's best. We're providing a platform for lawyers to operate well and to be efficient. But really what you're saying is it's not a metric that exists independent of the genuine operations of a business. And that's the challenge, huh?
Yeah.
To make it front and centre.
Yeah, 100%. And to build it into your operational program. And there are a number of firms who approach client experience metrics from multitude of ways. One client I was working with when I was consulting a couple of years ago was looking at it from the fact that they looked at their biggest and best clients and where they were converting lots of opportunities, and then what do we do on those profitable, multifaceted clients? What do we do with those? And they worked backwards, went, okay, these are the things that work. Let's now, push that out to other clients. Other firms are looking at it from a very leadership central, this is our purpose and we're here to solve clients, and then working outwards. But unless you filter that through to not just every single business services team knowing it, or a legal team or fee owner team knowing that this is what we stand for, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean for me in my role? What am I expected to consider and think about? And even down to very practical things.
Yeah.
Implementing a new IT system, a new AI program. How do our clients feel about that? Do they feel comfortable with us using AI on their documents? Do they know what it'll mean?
Yeah.
And when you actually ask the client...
Have we educated our client what it means?
100%. And then you actually ask the client, and say, you mean AI created this? So I've paid all of the same fee that I paid last year, but you've used AI. Well, I'm not happy about that. You've just, completely taken the mick. So there's things that we can do practically just to include the client in the conversation around how your firm is evolving from an IT standpoint. There's a quote that I spoke to an international client or a global organisation. They're based in the Middle East, and they said, Kim, we expect you, don't just want you, we expect you to be using AI now.
Yeah.
But for two reasons. One, to make it faster, better, cheaper. And two, to improve the service and product that we get.
Yep.
You have to show us how you're doing both of those things. It's not just faster and, it actually needs to be a different, better product. You need to be evolving the services and the delivery of the outcome that you give us. We had never thought about that. Well, how crisis? No, we're using it internally. But no, our clients want to see how we're using it and what that means for them.
And what that means. I have been traditionally a bit of a tech Luddite, except then AI came and I thought, my God, these things right, they're amazing. So I'm just like a true believer. Like I'm like, an evangelist AI. But in this sense, it's an absolute game changer for law. And I've invested a lot of time in it. And particularly now that I'm producing a lot more broader content, you see its power. As well as in the legal landscape, I say, although more work needs to be done, but it's all there from a data set perspective. We can't really have that conversation around disruption and pricing points without looking closely at AI and clients' take on AI. Now, I'm not suggesting it's the silver bullet and it's going to replace the work of lawyers. I think I've done a video, and I think that the strategic advisory role, the broader partnership role for people, and the empathy of a human connection will actually weirdly come to the fore in a lot more powerful a way. But let's talk about that. Where do you see AI going in the law? Will it disrupt prices? Will it fundamentally change the business model to even the point of a subscription model? Are we close, or is it such a big machine with such strong vested interest that it's likely to be a way off?
I think it's a way off. I think it promises a lot.
Yep.
It promises a lot
Yep.
of disruption. I think it's going to take us a long time to get to the point of seeing it fundamentally shift the model. There are always going to be new entrants that rely wholly on AI. I mean, I think I saw something in the press that there is now the very first, world's first AI-driven law firm. Like they are completely AI-driven. Alex Solo, who has his own firm, has always based it on data and utilising various systems and data to process people based on their requirements. And it's a very automated process. But you still have human interaction because it was acknowledged that's a really important element to this process.
Yes.
Highly commoditised conveyancing, wills, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think, not that wills and estate lawyers, et cetera, are going to be out of business, but the ones who will succeed are the ones who use AI most effectively within their business.
Agreed. And price it properly.
Absolutely, because if it's being done by a computer, it's going to be surely cheaper.
Yep.
But that means the human element is at a price premium.
Yeah.
So the human intervention and the human parts of working through a wills and estates plan, for example, will be much more increased in value, hugely valuable. So it changes the value of the human intervention and the overall delivery, but I don't think it's going to replace them, if that makes sense.
No.
And a partner I spoke to just this morning before coming to see you said he sees it as that AI won't replace him, but the people who will succeed are the ones who will use AI the best.
Yes.
Partners who will use AI the best and the most within their jurisdiction or their particular work.
Use it best to create efficiency, but really then free themselves up for the strategic relationship imperative of a partnership, and not hide behind the keyboard as much, because AI is going to be much better than you hiding behind
100%. But so many different studies have shown that, not just within legal service, professional services, but in any purchasing scenario or engagement scenario, the results are still clear that humans want humans.
Indeed.
They much prefer or want to use, they'll use an AI service that also includes a human over a purely AI service. They still want call centres. They don't just want chatbots. They want to, if they're going to be chatting with someone, they want to be a human they're chatting with. So I think that we are not evolved enough as a society, or as a human race, to be completely utilising robots for robots. We still want that human interaction. Within legal services, I think there is an opportunity for, particularly, again, I'm going to say that mid-tier, they've got money to invest, they're agile enough because they're not too big, they're mostly domestic, therefore it's operations in one time zone, one place, one city. They are the ones, I think, who will have the most ability to evolve and be agile around introducing AI in a really impactful way. Once you hit that enterprise scale, it's much harder across jurisdictions, time zone, languages, all the rest of it to roll these things out. Your clients are much more sophisticated, and they will be quite careful about how you're using AI and other things within the business to provide services. They absolutely still want access to partners and directors, like that's not even a question, and actually increased requirements. But they, again, coming back to what they expect that engagement to be high value. You're solving my problems. You're bringing solutions, not processing matters.
Yeah, you're giving me nuanced judgment.
Yes.
I rely on you for your strategic, nuanced judgment. I'm glad I'm in the mediation space, because it's very much about that, and the vagaries of the uncertain, and all the. It's not really conducive to an AI machine telling people what they need to do and why. So that I'm glad about that space, but I certainly see its power, and I see it as a potential game changer. As you say, it's going to be how it's implemented, and the primacy of human skills still. And I think you're right in law, particularly because, and in professional services, in accounting, for example, and consulting, because you are solving really very human, issues often.
Yes.
Even at a corporate level.
And it's involving different humans' agendas.
Yeah.
Even in a transaction.
Yes.
You're just managing a transaction.
Precisely.
But there is multiple people involved. Each person has their own agenda. Each person has their own risk measure.
Yeah.
It will be different. And you, as a human, again, the value then of your input is higher. This comes back to pricing. How are we pricing as we bring AI in? We can't just make it cheaper. The cost of running the firm is still the same. The other element to this is expectations of clients. We mentioned and spoke earlier about clients expecting AI to be used in particular ways to benefit them and the service and the product that they receive, and pricing, making it cheaper. What I truly believe will happen is what's happening in multiple different areas of expectations, particularly sophisticated clients who set the bar, is it's starting to become okay, we're anticipating and expecting you will use this, it will become a requirement. And we saw this over data security and ISO accreditations. Yeah. It was a nice to have, and then it became an essential.
Yes.
Then you saw DEI and, blended teams, including diversity and female representation and metrics. It was a nice to have. Now it's being built in and baked into many expectations and contracts and SOAs with firms. Then you've got things like sustainability and ESG. And again, it's a nice to have. We want to see you becoming more sustainable as a business and considering your supply chain. But then you've got businesses like EcoVadis in the UK coming out, which actually has a benchmark measure of your score as an organisation for how sustainable and environmentally friendly you are. That will become unless you have a silver accreditation from EcoVadis, we're not working with you, you won't get on. And it will become a requirement. Next is AI and expectations around AI and, the use of AI. And it's a nice to have, and we're expecting you to use it so it's cheaper, but it will become embedded into the requirements. So I do think whilst the larger firms are slower potentially to adopt and really roll these things out and in a really impactful way, they're less agile, they're the ones who are actually going to need to catch up pretty quickly because it'll become a requirement.
Well, I don't know if
clients.
you followed in one of the rags, I think Lawyers Weekly, Minter Ellison have embedded it and mandated. I think that's really clever.
It is.
Just making it kind of apparent that your people have to use it.
And they're the largest firm in Australia.
Yeah.
So, they are, and that's actually also interestingly flowing through to all their business services teams. I mean, even their marketing BD team, they've got an aspiration or a vision to have a really tech-enabled and AI-enabled team. So it's not just the lawyers, they're actually putting it through their operational teams. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
If only we could do that with CX.
If only we could do it. It's been a great conversation, Kim. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So your last gig was at Ashurst, and as I said, we shared two firms in common, although not really in the 90s. I was hiding in a corner with an old photocopier.
Yeah.
But it was pretty good hanging out in Fleet Street. I enjoyed that aspect. Where to from here in terms of Julep advisory and roles more broadly as a professional services strategist?
I suppose it's a little bit of an unknown, which I feel like is a privilege and a joy to be able to now to lean into those things that I'm truly passionate about, that I feel I bring a lot of experience and skill to, working with clients that I really enjoy at the moment. I'm working with a couple of clients and some coaching clients, but also some consulting clients where I'm doing some projects I really love. That's a joy and a pleasure. So I feel in a privileged position to do that. I think I just want to make sure I'm continuing to learn and grow, perhaps, evolve broader than just professional services. It's all very applicable, but we can learn from industries outside of professional services as well. So I think leaning into those areas I'm really passionate about to look to grow a client base where I can really help to shift strategic growth and client impact and client engagement in a way that the firm can truly adopt, and it changes ethoses and cultures, and that's something I'm really passionate about. So to be honest with you, where to exactly, I don't know. I feel like
it's not a bad path you're on, because at least you have a clear purpose in terms of where it's going to take you. Now, you're a professional services strategist, so I'm going to end with asking you this.
Yes.
Is there anything important about professional services strategy that we haven't talked about that we should?
Something that I'm really passionate about, which I don't think we think about enough, is are we moving in the right direction from a client-based perspective and a growth perspective? And I think that's an area that, as a professional services strategist, in a bit of a daggy term, it's looking at growth, trajectory of growth, and ensuring it's aligned to your strategic direction. It's an area I know that a lot of firms struggle with, and we often think, we're growing. So we're doing the right thing, we're growing, we're seeing revenue go up, but is it profitable? Is it performing? Is it in the areas that we want it to be in?
Is it strategically aligned?
100%. And ensuring that firms pause, they take time to consider that and go, all right, well, actually, no, we're growing in this space. We should actually be pulling back from that space because it's now unbalanced. Our revenue's unbalanced, and that's an increased risk. A lot of firms don't do the pause and reset, which I think is a really valuable place to be, or it becomes, and unfortunately I see so many firms growing despite themselves.
Yeah.
In a market where demand continues to increase, the domestic market is, going gangbusters. I think it's a valuable process for firms to go through. That's a space that I think is there's opportunities for firms to really crystallise.
I've been reflecting a bit on that in my journey now about, strategy is what you don't do as much as what you do. So, it's reflecting on what work I won't do and why, because that tells a lot to the market, and that really is an important. But it's hard, because we want to be wanted, and when a client reaches out, and so you can sometimes develop these cottage industries that come that you sort of develop historically around firms, and you look at it and go, oh, geez, we've got that over there. What are we doing over there?
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to right size a firm.
It is.
It's a challenging concept,
and there's people involved, huh?
Absolutely, and it's human. And partnerships are inherently that. They're a partnership, and as much as not all partners will like each other, you're all invested in the same business. It's your business as much as that partner's business. So,
exactly.
It's a hard thing to uncouple or to make really tough decisions. And this comes back to leadership, saying making those hard decisions with humility and authenticity as a leader of a firm that is going to impact people, but doing it in a humble and, a sincere way, and ensuring you're doing the best you can for the collective. That's hard, that's leadership, and that's tough. And I think a lot of law firm leaders are having to face that now.
I agree. Well, Kim, I've really loved this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me,
I really appreciate you've had a great career, and I'm looking forward to watching you, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to collaborate and work together.
That'd be nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damien.
Cheers.